My name is Sarah, and I'm 24 years old. This story begins on a cold, gray morning, the kind that feels like the world itself is mourning. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the black dress I had bought specifically for this day, my grandfather's funeral. Grandfather was more than just family to me, he was my mentor, my confidant, and the only person who truly understood me. When I was a child, he would sit with me for hours, telling me stories of his youth, his struggles, and his triumphs. He always ended with the same words. Sarah, never let anyone take what's yours. Fight for it, no matter what. Those words echoed in my mind as I walked into the funeral home. The room was filled with somber faces, but none of them felt the weight of his loss the way I did. My parents were there, of course, standing stiffly near the casket. My older brother, Alex, was nowhere to be seen, probably too busy with his latest big idea to show up on time. After the service, the lawyer approached me. He handed me a sealed envelope, my name written in grandfather's familiar handwriting. I waited until I was alone to open it. Inside was a short letter and a set of documents. My dear Sarah, this is for your future. Use it wisely, and remember what I've always told you. Love, Grandfather. The documents were for an inheritance fund, a substantial amount meant to secure my future. I felt a lump in my throat. Even in death, Grandfather was looking out for me. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be without him. One evening, I decided to check the inheritance fund. Grandfather had always been meticulous, and I wanted to ensure everything was in order. I logged into the account, my fingers trembling slightly. The page loaded, and my heart stopped. The balance was 0. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. This had to be a mistake. I called the bank, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. The representative confirmed it, the account had been emptied months ago. My stomach churned. Months ago? That was around the time Alex had suddenly started flaunting his new car and expensive gadgets. He had mentioned something about a business venture, but no one had seen any actual results. That night, I confronted my parents. They were sitting in the living room, watching TV, as if nothing was wrong. Where's my inheritance? I asked, my voice steady but cold. My mother's face paled, and my father looked away. Sarah, it's not what you think, he began, but I cut him off. Where is it? There was a long silence. Finally, my mother spoke. We had to use it. Alex needed the money for his business. He has dreams, Sarah. We thought you'd understand. Understand. My blood boiled. Alex's dreams were nothing more than excuses to live a lavish lifestyle without working for it. And my parents had enabled him, sacrificing my future in the process. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out, my mind spinning. Grandfather's words came back to me. Never let anyone take what's yours. They had taken everything from me, but they hadn't broken me. Not yet. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath the pain, a fire ignited. They thought they could take everything from me and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. The days following the confrontation with my parents were a blur. I avoided them as much as possible, burying myself in work and distractions. But the anger simmered beneath the surface, a constant reminder of their betrayal. A week later, I received a text from Alex. Family dinner at my place this Friday. Don't be late. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. Alex's place was a luxury apartment he had somehow managed to afford, despite his lack of a real job. I knew where the money had come from now, and the thought made my stomach turn. I didn't want to go, but something inside me pushed me to attend. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the need to see their faces, to gauge how far they would go to pretend everything was fine. Friday evening, I arrived at Alex's apartment. The place was as ostentatious as I remembered: sleek furniture, expensive art, and a view of the city that probably cost a fortune. Alex greeted me at the door with his usual cocky grin. "Sarah. Glad you could make it," he said, pulling me into a half-hearted hug. I forced a smile and stepped inside. My parents were already there, sitting on the couch and chatting with Alex's girlfriend, a woman who seemed more interested in her phone than the conversation. The dinner was a lavish affair, with food that looked like it belonged in a five-star restaurant. Alex made sure to mention how much everything cost, his voice dripping with pride. "So, how's the business going?" my father asked, his tone overly enthusiastic. Alex leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. "Amazing. We're expanding, and the profits are through the roof. It's all about taking risks, you know." I clenched my fork, my knuckles turning white. Risks? The only risk he had taken was gambling away my inheritance. My mother beamed at him, her eyes filled with pride. "We always knew you'd do great things, Alex." I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "A toast," I said, raising my glass. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. Alex raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. "To family," I began, my voice steady. "The ones who are supposed to protect you, to support you. But sometimes, family lets you down." I paused, letting the words sink in. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, and Alex's smile faltered. "And sometimes," I continued, my eyes locking with my parents', "family takes everything from you and expects you to be okay with it." The silence was deafening. My mother's face turned pale, and my father looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Alex, ever the oblivious one, laughed nervously. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes wary. I didn't answer. Instead, I set my glass down and walked out, leaving them to their guilt and lies. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. The mask was off, and they knew I wasn't going to let this go. But this was just the beginning. The days after the dinner were a whirlwind of emotions. I replayed the scene in my mind over and over: my parents' guilt-ridden faces, Alex's nervous laughter, the heavy silence that followed my toast. It was clear they hadn't expected me to confront them so openly. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Revenge isn't about acting impulsively, it's about strategy. I needed a plan, one that would hit them where it hurt the most. I started by gathering information. I dug into Alex's so-called business, uncovering a trail of failed investments, unpaid debts, and shady deals. It didn't take long to realize his success was nothing more than a house of cards, propped up by my inheritance. I also looked into my parents' finances. They had always been secretive about money, but I managed to piece together enough to see the bigger picture. They had drained my inheritance to fund Alex's lifestyle, leaving nothing for me. The betrayal stung, but it also fueled my determination. I didn't confront them again. Instead, I focused on myself. I worked tirelessly, pouring my energy into my job and building my own savings. I didn't need their money, I needed justice. And I was willing to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My uncle, my father's older brother, hosted a family gathering to celebrate his retirement. It was a big event, with relatives flying in from all over the country. The perfect stage for what I had planned. I arrived early, dressed in a sharp black suit that made me feel powerful. The house was buzzing with activity, but I kept to the sidelines, observing. My parents were there, of course, laughing and chatting as if nothing was wrong. Alex was his usual self, holding court in the center of the room, bragging about his latest business triumph. I waited until dinner was served and the room was full. Then, I stood up, holding a folder in my hand. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. My parents looked uneasy, and Alex's smile faltered. "To family," I began, my tone calm but firm. "The ones who are supposed to protect you, to support you. But sometimes, family lets you down." I opened the folder and pulled out the documents I had gathered. A few months ago, my grandfather left me an inheritance. A gift meant to secure my future. But when I went to claim it, it was gone. I paused, letting the words sink in. My parents' faces turned pale, and Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "My parents stole my inheritance to fund Alex's lifestyle," I continued, my voice rising. "They took everything from me, without even asking, without even caring how it would affect me." I turned to Alex. "And you? You didn't even have the decency to succeed. Your business is a joke, a front for your laziness and greed." The room was dead silent. My uncle looked horrified, and the other relatives exchanged shocked glances. I turned back to my parents. "You thought you could take everything from me and walk away. But you were wrong." I set the folder on the table and walked out, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. The fallout was immediate. My parents tried to apologize, but the damage was done. The family was divided, with some siding with me and others trying to downplay the situation. Alex's facade crumbled, and his so-called business collapsed under the weight of its own lies. I didn't stay to watch the chaos. I had said what I needed to say, and that was enough. I walked away from them that day, my head held high. The inheritance was gone, but I had something far more valuable, my independence and my self-respect. Revenge wasn't about hurting them, it was about reclaiming my power. And as I looked toward the future, I knew one thing for certain: I didn't need their approval or their money. I had myself. And that was enough.